Hi, everybody. My name is Samantha Lane, and I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing for the SE Shires Company. This is a very exciting Shires TV episode. It's been a total blast for me through this entire period getting to do these Shires TV episodes. It's a great opportunity to bring incredible musicians live to you on Facebook, for me to get to see some of these incredible people that I get to call colleagues and friends, and also just make things a little bit lighter, a little bit more fun, and keep it informative but entertaining as well. Tonight is a very special one. We are going to be featuring Mr. Blair Bollinger. Mr. Bollinger's been the bass trombonist of the Philadelphia Orchestra for the past 34 years.
Not that long. Don't make that face.
Not that long. 34 years, not a very long time, but it's an incredible career, and we'll chat a little bit more about that. And he's also teaching at the Juilliard School, the Curtis Institute of Music, and Temple University. All fantastic institutions, and the bass trombonists you get to study with him, they're some of the luckiest in the world. So it's a really exciting opportunity for us to be able to interview Mr. Bollinger, and we'll chat about bass trombone techniques and tips. We can chat about his career in the orchestra, of course. And then we'll also talk about some of his models and some equipment questions, because the Bollinger tuning system is something that it's always nice to be able to chat with the man himself about.
Sure.
I thought this would be a kind of fun opportunity. So if anybody has any questions during this broadcast, feel free to pop them in the comments below. I'm going to keep an eye on it, and we'll do our best to get to them. But in general, Mr. Bollinger, I'd love it if you would take it away and give us just a little bit of an intro about you and maybe your upbringing with music and how you came to be the bass trombonist of the Philadelphia Orchestra.
Oh, geez. Thanks, Sam. It's nice to be here, and it's nice of Shires to do this, and I'm happy to sit here and talk about the trombone, and specifically the Shires one. So, yeah, so 34 years in the orchestra. I went to the Curtis Institute of Music in Philly. So I had 5 years at Curtis, and then right into the orchestra after that, which is a fun story. We can talk about that a little later. You said where I started. Geez, my first instrument was piano, and then violin for a little while.
Okay.
Yeah, and then like some more piano, then finally trombone at age 11. Started in the school band, trombone.
And tenor trombone or bass trombone?
Oh, at that age, everybody plays tenor. I don't think everybody plays bass trombone then. Yeah, so it was actually I did switch to bass trombone fairly early, like when I was about 15. My teacher, I grew up in Georgia. Then my teacher there is Richard Brady, is a wonderful freelance bass trombonist in Atlanta. Said, "Hey kid, you got good low notes. Why don't you try this?" So the bass trombone and I were a good fit. So starting at age 15, I was playing mostly bass trombone. And so some players in the world, do tenor trombone and bass both. I've always been pretty much a bass trombone player. I felt like this much tenor trombone, so it's just how it works for me.
Yeah. And do you do any you do contra in the orchestra too?
Actually, I have never played contrabass trombone in the Philadelphia Orchestra at all.
Really? I know we've chatted about contra before, but
yeah, we've talked about it. Once every 5 years, do I see a part go across my stand that says contrabass trombone. So we need it very rarely, and I can play the same notes on the bass trombone, and with I think also a very good tone. It's different. It's slightly smaller, and the contrabass sound is a little bit bigger. At any rate, I'm pleased I still can make a big full tone on the bass trombone. I can play the same notes. So whenever I just play it on bass trombone.
Yeah, easier. Why not?
Yeah. So it's the folks in the opera orchestras that are playing stuff all the time. You need contra, but in the symphony orchestra, it's pretty rare.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. So what about the whole teaching? I mean, you're at 3 pretty incredible institutions. Where did you start? Like, what was the first school that you started teaching?
Temple hired me first, and then Curtis. So the Temple hired me pretty much right away. So I've been fortunate to gain a lot of experience there. And Curtis waited until I got a little older than the other students and asked me to teach. So I started teaching Curtis in '95.
Okay.
And then in 2013, Juilliard called, and I was honored, flattered to be also join that. So I'm fortunate to teach at 3 great schools, and 2 of them are absolutely some of the top music schools in the world.
Oh yeah.
So it's great. So I get to, geez, where am I going? I get to play in a great orchestra and teach great students. So I'm a pretty lucky guy.
Yeah, and it's really neat too, because you teach both bass trombone, applied lessons, all of that, but also some orchestral technique classes and rep classes.
Sure, yeah, I do lots of classes as well. Coach brass quintets, do orchestral rep classes. I conduct the brass choir at Curtis. We do some concerts every now, well, usually once a year. So I'm standing up in front of a bunch of musicians waving my arms. So that's kind of fun.
And then the other thing I was just going to say is, like, you know, you play all over the world with solo stuff as well. And I mean, it's always really nice to be able to see you like performing at some of these like trombone like things. You travel a lot in the Philadelphia Orchestra. Typically, this time period is a little bit weird. But I mean, what is that like being in an orchestra like Philly, where you play incredible venues with amazing conductors constantly?
I'm lucky. I get paid to go all over the world.
Yeah.
So yeah, they've taken me as far north as Helsinki and as far south as Buenos Aires and Santiago.
Whoa, cool.
And all over Asia and China and Singapore, Kuala Lumpur. We played Ho Chi Minh City and Saigon.
Yeah.
Played
Wow.
Vietnam, and so yeah, and all over Europe. So yeah, it's been great. And the one really nice thing about traveling with the orchestra is you get to meet local people and talk about music. Because if you go to Paris as a tourist, the only time you talk to Parisians is when you're giving them money. When you're ordering at the restaurant and you're buying a ticket or you're in a shop. The only time you talk to locals is when you're giving them money. So nice traveling with the orchestra, you can meet other trombone players and go out for a drink after the concert or something. So you really get to know the local folks and their lives as musicians. So that's one thing really that I enjoy about traveling with the orchestra that way.
Yeah, that's really neat. So I think I said this before we started, but so many of us in the brass community are all like pretty aware, or at least peripherally aware, of your start with the orchestra. 34 years ago, you're just a kid.
Yeah. So the way I got started, I had two teachers at Curtis. Charlie Vernon was my predecessor and is still sounds great in Chicago. Still playing in Chicago Symphony. So I studied with Charlie, and Glenn Dodson was the principal then. We lost Glenn; he died 10 years ago, maybe. At any rate, so while I was at school, I subbed in the orchestra several times. Charlie was out for one reason or another, so they would ask me to come and substitute. So that was a great experience. And then when he left to go to Chicago, they had an audition. And at the end of that audition, I was the last one standing. But Muti was concerned about a kid Ricardo Muti was the music director in Philly then, in Chicago now.
Yeah.
Muti was concerned about a kid who was still in school at the time. So they offered me a one-year contract with the understanding there would be another audition. And so I was welcome to audition again. So so that was the audition. And 2 weeks later was the orchestra's student solo competition.
Okay.
And so I did that, and so I was one of two winners of that solo competition. So I started playing in the orchestra in September the following year, and then I played a concerto with the orchestra as the student soloist. And they changed the rules; you can't do that anymore.
That's so funny.
Yeah, so that was fun. And then in January was another full open audition, and I came out on top at the end of that one, and Muti said, "Va bene," said, "You can give the kid the job." So that was January of '87.
Jeez, that is so wild.
Yeah, so I've absolutely flattered, honored. It's sort of a great job to play there. Play, as you said, great music with great colleagues and great conductors and great venues all over the world.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and it's really interesting too, because so many people in this side of things, in terms of like the orchestral playing, maybe start in a different orchestra and continue auditioning throughout their career. You're lucky both in, talent and, deserving to be there and stuff, but it's nice to be, I'm sure it's nice to be in a single place for your career. And like, you get to see the orchestra evolve over such a long period of time. And this brass in Philly
That's for sure. Yeah.
It's just amazing.
34 years. Yeah. It's changed a fair amount. The business changes, life changes.
Yeah.
So yeah, and we're in the midst of a giant change right now, and no one knows exactly how this one's going to end up.
Right.
But as anyone does going through a career, there's ups and downs. And Philly Orchestra, we've had our ups and we've had our downs too. And so this current down, we'll get over it. But the immediate future is quite cloudy, but I think we'll get over it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. What was your last concert before everything had to shut
The
down?
last thing we played on stage in Verizon Hall, we did a Beethoven concert, and then the very last notes played in our concert hall were our 4 trombones. We did the Beethoven 4 Equali. So Beethoven wrote one quartet for 4 trombones, called
Okay.
3 Equali, dry Equali. And we, with Philly Orchestra, after concerts, we often do chamber concerts. So we invite the audience to stay, those alike, and they come down towards the front. And so then a postlude, we'll have a 30-minute postlude. So since we were playing Beethoven, I think it was 5 and 6 on that concert. So then after the postlude concert was also Beethoven, and we were supposed to do this trombone quartet as part of the postlude concert. So we just, after we did that, the last concert we did there was actually no audience. So we did it just for the cameras
Right.
for our last concert. And so then we just stayed the 4 trombones and played the 3 Equali. So those were the last notes that were played in Verizon Hall.
Crazy. Wow, very fortuitous. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Echoing sound of the section.
Yeah.
That's really fun.
So yeah, the orchestras put that on the website. So our management's doing great about monitoring and having a plan of how we release videos and such. As we speak, the Bruckner 9 is on the Philly website from May of 2014, I think it was, with Yannick. So on Thursday nights they do concerts, and then on Saturday night we're having a big gala. So please, everyone, tune back in to Philly Orchestra on Saturday night at 8 o'clock. There's a big Philadelphia Orchestra gala thing. We have Yo-Yo Ma's going to do something from home, and Renee Fleming, and
Oh wow.
different stuff. So yeah, it's great. So we've pivoted from the moment from doing we've gone from playing concerts to being a media company.
Right.
we're now just streaming video. So
yeah. No, that's neat. So let's get into a couple things. Some people had written in about some questions. The first one is kind of big topic, so take it where you'd like to go with it. But bass trombone sound, how do you quantify and qualify what in your head is the perfect bass trombone sound? And how did you get there? How did you develop the sound that is the Bollinger concept?
Oh, thank you. Sound in the bass trombone is a little bit bigger than a tenor trombone, and not so big as a tuba, somewhere in between. But it's still a trombone, right? So there's some people refer to a woofy slide baritone, and some people have referred to my playing that way sometimes. So I definitely like to make a big, full, open sound.
Yeah.
And so the bass trombone sound to me is just a little bigger and a little rounder than a tenor trombone.
Yeah.
So especially, I'm a full-time orchestra player. I'll make up a number, something like I'll say 70% of the parts that come across my stand are actually third trombone parts,
Sure.
not specifically bass trombone. It's more the 20th century stuff that you actually need a bass trombone, or the Beethoven and Bruckner. It says bass trombone on the part, but a bass trombone in those days would have been a much smaller instrument than what we play now.
Yeah.
So really in my job in the Philadelphia Orchestra, I am the third trombone player and also the bass trombone player. You wear those hats at the same time.
Yeah. That's interesting.
So the sound, how did I develop it? And I do this in teaching all the time, the way to develop a tone on a bass trombone is with lots of low notes. So if you're playing in the low register, it makes you use a lot of air. It makes you keep the embouchure and the aperture open, so that then you get a lot of air through the instrument, and the tone then has an open, round feel to it, and not any way tight or nasal.
Yeah, and like in terms of section blend, there are a lot of different thoughts and schools in terms of where does the bass trombone occupy from principal tenor trombone through tuba. What is your thought in the Philadelphia Orchestra? How do you describe like the cohesiveness of your section?
We have, I'll say it this way: we have a principal trombone, and we have a second, and we have a bass. Not everyone can be a chief. Some people have to be Indians. If you remember the childhood game, that I grew up on, is the way I say it. So yeah, so then I guess if one way of thinking of it would be then style comes from the top. So if it's Nitsan, we have co-principals, Nitsan Rose and Matt Vaughn. So whichever's playing first, then we'll defer to their opinion on style. But then we say intonation usually comes from the bottom, because if you have to build from the chord up, so then style comes from the top, intonation comes from the bottom.
Yeah, that's neat. Okay. So in terms of that stuff, I mean, for those of us who aren't sitting in a top 5 orchestra day in and day out, how much time do you guys spend talking about section stuff? I mean, you've played this repertoire together for a very long time, but
Yeah.
if you're checking in with each other about something, are you grabbing a little bit of time, like between stuff? Or are you just talking conceptually? Like, it's kind of neat to pick your brain about what is it like in the day of a rehearsal?
Yeah. So I'll just relate this anecdote. This morning, I was on a Zoom meeting for Curtis, for a faculty committee, and our first platoon, Danny Matsukawa, mentioned that he said, "Oh yeah, the trombones, you guys are always having sectionals. I hear you back there, the three of you working together all the time." But thank you. It was very nice. So yeah. So then it was nice to hear a colleague recognize that we do work together as a section. So honestly, when we were all new, so let's see, Nitsan joined in 95 and Matt in 97, I think.
Yeah.
Eric Carlson joined the orchestra 4 weeks before I did, a fact which he never lets me forget. 4 weeks seniority on me. But at any rate, so we've been together for 25 years, you know. So
long time. Yeah.
So the way I say it, especially with Eric, so I know when he's going to breathe before he does. But so yeah, we do get together and work, because, you know, intonation chords, so we have to work out a trombone section in the symphony orchestra is all about a section. You know, it's not like first oboe who has all the solos. So there are a few trombone solos here and there, but by and large, what we do is the three of us function together as a section. So I couldn't put a number on it, how much we rehearse, you know, as needed.
Yeah.
And even since we've been working together so long, we know each other so well, and we know how to play together. It just takes a few minutes. Like honestly, it'll be usually be Nitsan will say, "Hey, when rehearsal's over, can we just stay here for a few minutes and check this passage?" And so yeah, we do that, and it takes just a few minutes to iron out just one or two bumps that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. Somebody had written in with a great question about endurance. Playing the Philadelphia Orchestra, it's not a small orchestra. You guys put out a lot of sound. How do you work on maintaining your chops and having the endurance to play through big repertoire when maybe the week before was pretty light? Or how do you navigate those? Is your routine pretty much the same every day?
No, yeah, I definitely warm up and practice differently depending on what we have to play.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're playing Rossini La Ladro Overture, which is real fun, it has just, you know, one part, and actually the original Ricordi edition is labeled bass trombones. In the Philly Orchestra, I usually play it. So I have to play in a very different style for that than if suppose we're playing a Tchaikovsky or a Bruckner or a Shostakovich symphony, something really heavy duty. So I do warm up differently and focus on different aspects of my playing depending on what we do. And generally we do, you know, one program for the week. So
Okay.
it's a very different way of playing. If you're a young player who is taking auditions, you have to be able to play everything kind of all the time. And so I have the luxury of being able to focus on specific aspects of techniques, sort of week to week. There are always exceptions to that, of course, where things get mixed up in concerts, but you know, different styles. But a lot of times I'll tailor my practice and tailor my warm up to what we're playing that week.
Yeah. So your students.
So endurance. Honestly, I'm playing the low notes. You know, so it's I'm the only time one of the few times I remember having a real endurance issue was playing Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Really? That's interesting.
So that's becoming more popular these days. We do, they show the movie and we play the score live. And that whole truck chase scene, you know, when the German guy gets chewed up by the propellers, and that whole truck chase until they get to the bazooka pointed to the ark, bum, 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 bum. It just, you know, it was never intended to be played live, right?
Oh, right.
They just record this stuff in snippets, you know, for the movie. But when you're playing that, holy cow. that one, that one's a killer. Which you kind of have to stop and take a break every now. Actually, Eric split his lip.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Put his trombone down. His mouthpiece was bent.
Stuff can be.
But so that's one of the few ones where for bass trombone the endurance is a factor, because usually if I'm playing along with in a symphony orchestra, someone described this once as special teams. We come in at the important moment and make a big sound. We're not playing all the time like the strings are.
Really good point. It's a really good way to think about it too. So like, yeah, I mean, like your schedule in the Philadelphia Orchestra typically is a little bit more tailored and specific. You teach a lot of bass trombonists though. What is your recommendation for them as they're like going through, maybe even now, like everybody's off at this point? What are you telling your students in terms of their practice schedules or what they should be working on?
Oh yeah, so I've told them for my students for this time when you have no concerts scheduled, you don't have to play in public.
Right.
It's a great chance to focus on specific aspects of your technique. So if you want to work on your high range, so you can play all kinds of high notes right now, and really focus on that and build. These little small muscles up here, they take time to build, and you can focus on one aspect of your technique to the detriment of another. So if you're really focusing on high rate, your low range is kind of
right.
real bad. But no worries, it'll come back in very short order. So I've told them this, double tonguing. Okay, I'm going to see if I can get my double tongue up to quarter note equals 2,000. Pick a number. So just
great goal.
Now is a good time to focus on specific things to the detriment of others, because you don't have to play in public.
Yeah, yeah. Really just like go for it in some of these different situations.
Yeah.
So
and find ways of keeping people motivated too. I was asked to be on a jury, so there's the Swiss trombone competition.
Right.
Have you seen that one go by? Yeah, so that's great. They've organized that over there, so I'll be one of the judges for that. And so it's great that people are coming up with a way to keep us all motivated and keep things going until we can start playing live music again, start concerts. Right. So that's one project that they've done to keep things going that way.
Yeah, it's kind of neat. There's been more for the online trombone competition, more online like boot camps, and our colleague George Curran has a boot camp coming up soon, and there's just stuff popping up all over the place. It's nice to see so many people who are just, I don't want to say accepting what's going on right now, but taking advantage of this time and doing what they can to make it a more positive thing. For sure. So, and we'll see what happens with the fall, especially on the teaching side. Hopefully everybody can return and it's in-person lessons, but I saw that you're doing quite a bit of Zoom lessons. You had your nice setup there.
Yeah, I had to do that. So we'll be doing that in the fall for a little bit too. The three schools that I teach at are all working on plans now for what we're going to do in the fall.
Yeah.
And it'll be, flexibility is the key. We don't know. Nobody knows exactly what's going to be happening in the fall. So the schools are trying to develop flexible plans so we can pivot between, remote learning and in-person learning, or hybrid, so sort of combination thereof. So that kind of stuff's working on now. So yeah, we've all had to become little studio producers here. Had to get up here at lighting, and I got the Blue Yeti external mic. That helps a lot.
Neat. That's cool.
So then I have two monitors, which also really help. It can keep the music on this one. Actually, there's three. I've got the sheet music on the iPad. I'm using my laptop for Zoom, and then I've got the student picture comes up over here on the external one. So we all have to have these little mini TV studios.
Yeah, and it's definitely tough. I mean, it's been fun for a lot of people who are taking lessons outside of their normal teachers, because they finally have more of an opportunity to get to do these online competitions or get to take a lesson from somebody else. But it's got to be strange, and it's really great that you guys have all persevered the way that you have during this. Yeah,
we're doing our best with it. I've also told the students it's also perfectly okay actually to put the trombone in the case for a little while.
Yeah,
it's complete. Everybody, we're all human. You need a break, and so there's you don't have concerts to play, so just go do something else. Give your head a break, and come back and refresh. Personally, that's actually what I've been doing. Is I've been on a Corona sabbatical, is what I call it. So we're fortunate to have the time at home, and we're finishing up a major home renovation project that started back in September. So I've actually enjoyed having a little bit of break, and then with our summer courses are getting started soon, so I'll get back into it here real soon.
Yeah. So taking a break after a few days off playing or whatever it happens to be, what's your approach to getting back into it? Because there are a lot of people who are in the same
Yeah.
boat, even if they don't want to admit it. But
Yeah, well,
right.
I'm not ashamed to admit it.
Yep.
I took the time off, and I think I'll come back all the better for it.
Yeah.
It's just, as I say, sabbatical exists for a reason. We humans it's good to have a break and come back refreshed.
Yeah.
I think like an athlete. So just you have your muscles in your face, the muscles in you use for breathing. You just have to get back in shape. So you start with things that are less stressful on your body and move to things that are more stressful. So you start with lower, simpler things and then move into higher range things later as you demand more effort from the muscles. So this real simple way of saying is just think like an athlete. Stretch, take it easy, do it and do wind sprints. Do short things, take a break, and come back. Especially if you have the time at home, you don't have to do anything. So you can practice for 15 minutes, and then take a break
Right.
and come back to something. And whatever works for you. But the overarching philosophy is think like an athlete.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. And I'm trying to just we had another question that was kind of similar. Let me just see if I can find it really quick. Let's see, where did it go? So even though you're taking some of this time off, or some of us in general are, listening is always important. Are you queuing up recordings, and do you have any favorite recordings that people should throw on? Either the Philadelphia Orchestra, so no, shameless plug, but anything
Right.
else too.
So I'll just say some of my favorite
Yeah.
orchestral recordings.
Yeah.
Honestly, the one that comes to mind first is Reiner Chicago Wagner. So that was a disc right around 1960, I think they recorded that. So the Chicago Symphony, Fritz Reiner. It's Meistersinger and some excerpts out of Good Down. Oh, just fantastic brass playing all the way through there. So
Chills. Yeah.
That's one of my favorites. Whenever I would do road trips when I was younger in the car, the first thing I put on was that disc. Road trips with that. So boy, for that a bunch of times.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorites. I'm trying to think Philly Orchestra stuff that we've done that I like a lot. We did some with Muti. We did all the Brahms. We're good. With Savalich, we did a lot of Richard Strauss. Were fun. With Charles Dutoit, we did all of Rachmaninoff, a disc with him. And with Eschenbach, we did a lot of Mahler.
Yeah.
So it's fun with our various conductors we've had over the years have their own preferences and their own styles and their own affinities. So it's nice to have those variety of things there.
Yeah, I know, like here in our house, we've been doing a lot of listening, and it's been kind of neat to be able to watch some of our favorite orchestras and be able to throw it up on the TV and still sit in the living room and get to see, some of the stuff, or turn the speakers up all the way and just have it going on in the house.
One nice thing about our strange times these days, so Philly Orchestra, we're doing their broadcasting concerts. Actually, I mentioned the Bruckner's on now.
Yeah.
A couple weeks ago, they did one from Beijing in 1993. So it was the very, very first time I went to China was 1993. So it was fun to see that concert then. And so, boy, some of my colleagues look really young. And I was also going, geez, well, he's not living anywhere. He's not living there. So what is that, 27 years ago? Yeah, so, life goes on. But so it's fun to have this time to, one of the fun things we can do in this strange time is revisit those old things and sort of reminisce a little.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get a little geeky and let's talk a little bit about like some trombone tips and technique stuff.
Okay.
We get this question a lot, and sometimes it comes from people who are teaching trombone, and sometimes it comes from students themselves. But do you have, if you were going to give a masterclass and somebody's going to get up in front of you, do you have like 2 or 3 tips that like you immediately see success with for a bass trombone player? Not a trick question. Like it could be just something as easy as you say, like you need more air. But like if a teacher's coming to you and saying like, how can I get better results for my bass trombone students? What are some of the first things that come to mind for you?
I'll talk, I guess, a little bit about my philosophy of master classes. I
Yeah,
guess I
sure.
would say, yeah, that when I'm doing master classes, I always say that I have to find something that the student and I can talk about that the audience will find interesting. So something that I can help the student with
Yeah.
that will also apply to the people listening in the audience. So, you can talk concepts of air. Those are always good. Work for me. You can talk concepts of embouchure, which is the same for all the brass instruments. We have the same muscles to work with. We just use them in slightly different ways. So those kind of things I'll talk about. A lot of usually I'll end up talking about vibrato because I have some different things I do with vibrato on that and philosophies with that. Articulations usually come up. So, I mean, I'm trying to give
Yeah.
you something specific to hang on to here. It's kind of hard to say how can you make students better. It
Right.
all depends on the student,
And definitely the age of the student too. So like this usually comes in for people who are teaching high school based trombonists. Like I teach a studio of I typically teach tenor students, but like I have a bass trombonist in my studio, and what are some common things to make some improvements?
Um,
That's
if
usually
you're a tenor trombone player teaching bass trombone, don't let him play tuba parts. It happens all too often that the tenor trombone players play the tenor trombone parts, and the bass trombone player plays the tuba parts or the really low stuff.
Yeah.
And so then they never develop a high range.
Yeah.
And if you want to make a career, certainly if you want to be an orchestral bass trombone player, as I said, 70% of the job is third trombone. So you have to, the guy who wins the job is usually the player who has the good secure high range and is a great musician. It's not the big bad sound that wins the orchestral auditions. I think I can do this. This will work for general. So a lot of times I'm doing classes. I have my bass trombone trivia question. So
Okay.
I'll go ahead and ask the question, and I'll give the answer because I certainly wouldn't expect you're a very fine trumpeter, but I wouldn't expect you to know all the bass trombone questions. But anyway, so a lot of times I'll ask students to name the top 5 high-profile U.S. bass trombone players. Now that's of course, it's a loaded question. That's why I say high-profile. The best is a very subjective kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's say top 5 U.S. high-profile. I would say there's Charlie Vernon, Chicago. George Curran, New York Phil, Paul Pollard, and Metropolitan Opera, Jim Markey in Boston, and then me. Usually those 5 usually come up as high-profile U.S. bass trombone players. There are certainly many other fine players who I didn't mention, but I need those 5 because I'm about to make a point of why those 5. So then I'll ask a student, so if you happen to know, of those 5 players, which of those studied primarily bass trombone in college? And the answer is only one of them, me.
That's so wild. And it's funny because
the other 4 were tenor trombone players,
right,
until later on. So Jim Markey was a principal in Pittsburgh Symphony, and then also associate in New York.
Yeah.
And Charlie Vernon borrowed a bass trombone a few weeks before his first audition in the Baltimore Symphony. So and Paul has his doctorate, and George was a euphonium player.
I know, it's crazy.
In undergrad. So that speaks to my point is don't let the bass trombone players play tuba parts. You have to keep them playing trombone parts. So 4 of these top 5 U.S. bass trombone players didn't even study bass trombone in college, in undergrad. Maybe they did in graduate school. So that's my bass trombone trivia question, and the importance of absolutely. I love playing notes. I do it all the time, and but that's not what will win you an audition.
That's a really great answer, and I think that will give a lot of people a lot of clarity too, just in terms of steering some of their students in the right path. Speaking of winning an audition on a committee, Brian Johnson had a great question. Can you talk about sitting on the audition committee for the rest of your section or the brass section in general? What's appealing when you're listening to somebody?
A clean technique. Trombones, it's articulation. Trombones generally we're really sloppy with the slides, sloppy with the articulation. It's like but whenever a trombone player comes in and has clean legato, nice slurs, and a good secure marcato, and a nice crisp staccato, oh boy, it stands out right away.
Yeah.
And the rest of the instruments, the players on, and usually if you're talking about auditioning for an orchestra, trombone players are a minority on the committee. You'll usually have, 10, 12 people on a committee, and maybe 2 or 3 of them are trombones. So the rest of them couldn't care less about this crazy slide thing that you have. They just want to hear good, clean articulation, and no slide slurp, and no slop, and no slurping up the food kind of thing with your trombone slide. It's fun playing solos, and doing these kind of trombone specific things can make a lot of fun in solo work. But in orchestral technique, you have to play with a really clean, clear technique that works with 100 other people sitting on stage doing the exact same thing at the exact same time. So it's a very specific box that you have to work in as far as style. So with trombones, it's, for me, what really stands out in auditions is articulation.
Yeah.
Most everyone makes a very fine tone. You can get into specifics of preference or not, like this a little better for that. There's a lot of great tones out there. And for bass trombone, a secure high range and a clean articulation, and someone who can play a beautiful phrase. I mean, so the guy who wins the job, guy or girl, happens more often these days, is usually the best player who fits in with the players that you have. So you have to realize an orchestral audition is not a may the best person win competition. It's not about it's not about the old phrase is may the best man win. That's not the point. The point of an orchestral audition is to find a person to do a job.
Yeah.
And so we use the auditions as in many ways, having an audition is a lousy way to find a person to do a job, but nobody's come up with anything that's better, that's anywhere fair at all. But so it's not about may the best man win. It's about finding the best person to do the job. I like to describe how we hired Carol Yonch as our tuba player.
Yeah.
So Carol, she's been with us, she'll yell at me, 15 years now? I think something like that. Anyway, I'm terrible with numbers. But so our longtime wonderful colleague, Paul Kraswicki, had retired. And so we had an audition and came up empty. We didn't have any winner. Actually, we had a couple auditions before we found a winner finally. But at any rate, so he had retired, so we needed a tuba player for the following season. So we took the people who had made finals and then invited them to come play a chunk of weeks the following season. So actually, that worked great.
Sure.
Through the audition, then we identified 5 or 6 people that we were interested in, and then each of them came and played a chunk of weeks. So, in the best of all possible worlds, for me, that seemed to work pretty well, because you got to having the audition kept it fair that everyone had to play behind the screen until the Philly Orchestra screen comes down at the end. But so then you use the audition to identify people that you like, and then you get to work with them for a period of time. Yeah. You're making a much more informed decision. But that takes 2 years.
The process.
So it's just not practical all of the time.
Yeah, that's wild. And it's interesting. I didn't realize that Carol had been with the orchestra that long. It's such a cohesive section, but in a way, it all still feels almost like new every time I hear you guys play. Like it's exciting and it's really neat.
Yeah, I guess it's close to 15. I'm terrible with the numbers, but
that's okay.
It's at least 10.
Yeah. Here, let's get to another question that somebody had written in with. Anthony was wondering if you scale down equipment for smaller works. Like, do you use the travel horn, or do you use a single valve set, or do you make any other modifications?
Rarely, yes, but rarely.
Okay.
The one time that really sticks in my mind is we were playing Schubert. I guess it was the unfinished with Simon Rattle on the podium. So we're really thrilled. Philly is one of the few places in the United States that Simon Rattle comes to conduct, and we love playing for him. And boy, you talk about years. A man, who knows the orchestra. And
oh my gosh.
Yeah, he hears everything. And so he specifically asked for smaller equipment for Schubert, early 1800s. So in that instance, then we did play smaller equipment, smaller mouthpieces. I think it was, Nissan was, he had his like a Bach 36 that he plays sometimes. They'll do that, or Matt will play alto, and Eric will play straight horn. And what did I do for that one? Yeah, so I just had a smaller mouthpiece and not the dual bore slide, just a single bore slide. But it still wanted to be a bass trombone. We didn't want 3 tenors. So that's because the parts there are specifically labeled alto, tenor, bass. So we try and keep those three trombones. So uh, yes, but rarely do we actually change equipment. And that's sort of it's a philosophical thing a little bit too. And we'll have conductors that will come in and ask us to do things, and we're like, well, no, this is the Philadelphia Orchestra. But for an example, sometimes we have Russian conductors that come, and I'm not an expert on the Russian style, but it's my understanding that the brass players in Russia use a lot of vibrato a lot of the time. At least that's what we've been asked to do. So, like, especially in the fortissimo, even using a lot of vibrato. And this is definitely not an American style. That makes the sound is really, to our ears,
very different.
This is, of course, very subjective. Very subjective. It's a style. It's an opinion. But to our ears, a lot of vibrato in the fortissimo just makes it wacky. Intonation goes really crazy. And so when we've had conductors ask to do that, we're kind of like, we don't do that here.
Quite, yeah.
This is Philadelphia Orchestra. I mean, we'll try and meet you here, but we're not quite going that far.
Yeah. That's funny. So, like, maybe we can. That's a good segue to maybe start chatting a little bit about your models, and
Sure.
and also definitely like the Bollinger tuning system. Can you describe for us who are trumpet players, or just Facebook land out there, a little bit about why you set the horn up in the way that you do with the
Yeah, the Shires Bollinger model exists because of the way I tune the valves. Is slightly different than most people. I've been playing this way for a long time, and talked to several makers about doing it, and I would get usually a standard response of, "Wow, that makes a lot of sense," and I would say, "Great, so you'll build it," and they say, "No." We have to build what our customers want to buy. They don't know this, they won't want to buy it. Okay, well, that makes sense. So then I figured that, well, I guess I got to write a little book, and then people will know it and they understand it. So I did write a little book about valve technique.
And I just linked it.
Thank you very much. And so I was speaking and playing at one of the trombone conventions in Washington, and went there and presented my book and lecture and all kind of thing. And I guess it was a couple of years later, then Shires called and said, we're getting a lot of requests for instruments with your tuning system. Like, finally!
And the heavens opened, and
yeah. So I sent a copy of the book, and Steve was with the company then. Steve said, thank you very much, but I said, if I'm not really shopping. I had been playing an Edwards trombone for 20 years, very fun instrument. And I said, but if you want me some try, I've always admired the craftsmanship. I'd like to see, what Shires has. He said, well, rather than us sending you something to try, would you like to work with us to make a Bollinger model trombone? Well, thank you.
Well, sure.
I was very flattered. That would be very nice. So then I spent the better part of a year making, I don't know, half a dozen trips up to Massachusetts, try stuff, and would bring things home and play in the orchestra and play for my colleagues and send things back. And so we ended up with the Shires Bollinger model trombone right here. Yes, and it's based around the valve. So in a bass trombone, we have, well, I don't want to get too wonky on you here.
No, I mean, we get a lot of questions. Like, this is a really nice thing because we'll be able to refer people to come back and watch. So I think it's an opportunity to talk about it.
All right, then. Up until actually there's, I guess in the early 1900s, back up. So a bass trombone in Schubert's time or Beethoven's time had no valves. It was just a larger instrument, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not an authority here, but somewhere in the mid-late 1800s, someone came with the idea of putting a little lever here and you move your thumb. So then you route the air through here, so you extend the instrument. So they put one valve on it and made bass trombone. I think there were, in the 1920s, there were one or two experiments with putting a second valve on a bass trombone, but it wasn't really until like the 1950s or 60s that a bass trombone with two valves became common at all. And they would had one valve here, and then they added a second valve up above it, so you could, with your thumb, you do the first valve, and then you slide up, you could do the second one. So you could do one valve or both. You couldn't do them separately. It was just so dependent.
Right.
dependent bass drum. The second valve is dependent on the first. You do one or both. And then I'll say in around about 1970 or so, some different players in different places. There was a guy in Los Angeles, so I'm blanking on the name, started experimenting with putting them down. I think Ed Kleinheimer in Chicago also experimented with making them independent. So the second valve would then be put in line with the first one, so you could do one, and then with the finger, they lowered another system, so you could do an independent system. So that's the origin of a double valve bass trombone. Now, when they took that second valve from being dependent, when they took it to make it independent, they kept the same tuning as it was when it was dependent. And once you change from dependent to independent, well, that tuning system maybe is not the best solution then. But that's what they kept. People were used to it. They had to sell what they know. They were used to have the second valve did one thing. So when they made it independent, they kept the same tuning system. And the very first double valve bass trombone I got was when I was a student, and a craftsman in Atlanta copied. No one was really making them and selling them like as a whole separate thing. So he copied for me to make this independent one. And when he copied the tuning, he didn't get it exactly right. Nice. So the way I say it, I didn't invent this system. It just fell in my lap. Right. But I realized I think it actually makes more sense. Yeah. So the Bollinger tuning system is not an invention, but it's something that I've helped popularize. So I'm sure I'll put the name on it. Yeah. So for me, the second valve is tuned slightly differently, which then makes a lot of the arpeggios on the instrument line up. I say the Western classical music is built on scales and arpeggios. If you can design your instrument to make scales and arpeggios easier, well, then many passages in music become much easier. Yeah. So with my system, it's absolutely easier to do a lot of those arpeggios, and passages come out nicely. So there are many fine players who do not use my system, and they sound great. It's just, in my opinion, harder. Yeah, yeah. You have to do a whole lot more adjustment with the right hand. With mine, you can leave the right hand alone and just move the valves. So that's sort of a real quick. No, that's awesome, and I did link the book because you give some like technique and examples and yeah. Can I play a little bit? Yeah, sure, absolutely. Arpeggios are right there. So yes, it is a slide trombone, but I say I've got 2/3 of a tuba. I've got the two valves here. So the arpeggios line right up, and many passages you'll play in music. There's Hindemith, the symphonic metamorphosis. If you're playing it with a traditional fingering, is a whole lot to do. Can you see that on the? Yeah, no, you can. Yeah, we can. So that's just really, and that all that is a B flat minor arpeggio. So just an example of if you can tune the instrument to make scales and arpeggios easier, many passages in music become easier. So yeah, the rest is just sort of an elaboration on that. Yeah. That's a real quick walkthrough of the tuning system. It's nice to be able to hear from you, to be honest. I've gotten to hear you talk about it a few times, maybe at an ITF or some ATW or something, something in the audience. We've talked about it in some other Shires events and stuff, and we have a few copies of your book, so it's always nice when somebody's at the shop. But it is really great because there are some examples and you can kind of test some stuff out. Your model has become one of the most popular bass trombones that we make, and is made all over the globe, which is really cool. And so we do include an additional tuning slide so that you can play it in conventional tuning if players wanting to try both things. But the whole hallmark about it in terms of the valve set is definitely that tuning system. And so it's really nice for people to be able to kind of have that revelation where they're like,
I haven't had this setup before, and my life is better. Like,
Good.
it's
Good.
like it's totally like a thing.
Thank you. It's nice. Yeah, it's nice when I'm traveling around the world and the orchestra's on tour and I do a master class and someone walks up with a Bollinger. Oh, good. You like it? Nice. Yeah, good.
Have fun.
So yeah, I remember as a student, I would be doing these fingerings, and Charlie Brennan, my teacher, would go, "I don't know what you're doing." He said, sounds good. Sounds good. So okay, fine. But so the fingerings were a little different. So in my students now, I say if you're starting with me as a college freshman and we're going to have 4 years together, I'll encourage you to see if you can use my fingering system, because for the next 4 years, it's just going to be easier for you and I to make fingerings and such. But especially if I have a grad student or someone who's already done well, then I leave them alone. I don't insist they change my system, because they've already achieved considerable success with what they're doing. So you can do it your way. It's just harder. It's fine.
Don't be envious, since I don't have to work as hard. We had another specky question from Tyler, who was wondering about the fact that your throw is a little bit different on the Bollinger.
Yeah.
So you want to talk about that?
Yeah. Lever geometry, we call it. Yeah. So with the what are we calling these now? The axial flow. What name is this?
No, it's the Bollinger.
Okay. Just the valve itself. These valves have a little bit longer throw. So what we've done, this is really hard to describe, but it's physics. If you can move the center of effort closer to the center point, then it has to move farther. So if you have a lever going like this, if you can move the effort closer to the pivot, it has shorter distance to travel. Yeah. So yeah, these for the axial valves on the Bollinger model, they're fast. There are other, so the Shires rotary valves are fast, and then on the Bollinger model, I use the true bore valves. They're really durable. They're strong. They're a little faster than these. Yeah. So for orchestral playing, I like the tone on the axial flow valves, which is why we use that on the Bollinger model. And then we refined the lever geometry to make the throw a little shorter, and so then for axial valves, they're really fast.
Yeah, they're fantastic. So, and you mentioned too that true bore setup. So we just, maybe it's been 2 years now, officially, something about that in terms of that travel model.
Yeah.
What was your reason for wanting to do it? And it's interesting because it's a very similar horn to your horn, but reconfigured in a different way. And so
the way I say it is, it's a completely different concept, but it ends up in kind of the same place.
Yeah, totally.
So the travel model. So as we all know, well, especially now, but before a few months ago, travel just gets harder and harder and more complicated. So trying to bring a trombone on an airplane just gets harder and harder. Yeah. So I was thrilled to work with Shires to develop a travel model that we can have a real compact case for. So you have those really nice Italian cases that are just real compact and square. I use that sometimes, or also I have the Marco Bono case that they originally made at the time. And so that looks like a viola. I call it a viola. Yeah. So then you have the detachable flare on the bell and the true bore valves. It's a real compact thing that I can walk up to an airplane and not panic. Just bring it on and it just goes right overhead. So yeah, it's just when I have the luxury of traveling with the orchestra, then my trombone goes in the case goes in the trunk, and they take care of it. But so these days, actually, I usually bring the travel model on tour. I carry it with me, so when I'm off doing a master class or teaching something, then I have that instrument to carry around with me. And then the Bollinger model is in the orchestra trunks, and I show up to play a concert, and I play that one. So I use my travel model for teaching and for traveling around, and play the Bollinger model on stage in the orchestra all the time.
Yeah, I think I heard you play it at ITF a couple of years ago, and the final recital that you played, you're playing on your model. I think sounds amazing, but it's I get excited about this stuff. But
yeah. So the travel model, it has a lightweight slide, and then the detachable bell flare, and it's also a lightweight bell.
It is,
so you add the mass of that collar there with a lighter weight bell and lighter slide and the true bore valves. So it's coming from an opposite place, but it kind of ends up in the same sort of thing. So the travel model plays remarkably similar to the Bollinger model for being such a completely different starting place.
Yeah, it's the best way to describe it. You just come to it. You still get to the same place. So,
yeah, they're coming from the opposite end of the room, but you end up kind of in the middle.
Right. Yeah. Here, let me see, because we had another question that just got asked. Let me see. I think it was Ethan. Ethan was wondering if you could talk about what makes the Philadelphia Orchestra sound unique.
The strings.
Strings. So,
yeah.
So what is it like for being a brass player, being like in one of the world's best orchestras for string musicians? I mean, like.
So the Philly Orchestra strings put out a lot of sound.
Yeah.
As do the winds. Every now and then we'll do some avant-garde piece or something, or I'll end up sitting close to the winds. Those people play loud.
It's incredible. Yeah.
Blame the brass for playing to the holy cow. Those winds are putting out a lot of sound. So at any rate, the tradition of the Philly Orchestra is just the luscious, rich string sound, and so we all blend in with that. So there's a little bit of marketing here, but there's also some truth in that. They used to call it the solid gold Cadillac kind of sound.
Oh, funny. Okay.
Yeah, that was probably a '60s era kind of marketing tag. But yeah, so it's just a rich, full sound. Not as athletic as others, not as brawny as others, and it's all just a rich, full sound, and it's based off the strings. We usually give credit to Stokowski first. Leopold Stokowski was a music director in the 20s and 30s, and then Eugene Ormandy really took that sound and brought it in, and he was a violinist himself. So, and he was music director for 44 years, something like that. So a long time. So give a lot of credit to him for really encouraging and developing that kind of sound. And then our music directors since have built on that, and they would say that I just watched an interview the other night, with Muti. Said, yes, of course we have this wonderful round sound, but we change it for Haydn, we change it for Brahms, we change it for Bruckner. So that's certainly because any good conductor wants to have the right kind of sound for the right kind of piece.
Yeah.
But there is, within that, and I think it's wonderful that there are different sounds to different orchestras.
Yeah.
I love hearing the European orchestras and trying to guess is it Vienna, is it Linz, Concertgebouw, which one it is, because you can a lot of times, and it's usually pretty easy to differentiate between European and American. Just listen to the oboe, because there's a different oboe style there. And the world gets smaller all the time. For the orchestra, we've hired a new principal oboe who's French.
Fantastic.
So Philippe, I'm assuming he's still in, Lord only knows. I mean, the world is just in this crazy never land right now. He's supposed to start with us in September. We'll see, exactly how that's going to work out. But so it's a big sea change for the Philly Orchestra to bring in a French oboe player.
Wow, that's wild.
Yeah.
So let me just see, because there was one other part to that question. Obviously, there's a big brass tradition in Philadelphia Orchestra for a very long time. Do you guys, the question was phrased, does the brass section consciously try to build upon the sound tradition of the orchestra? So specifically brass.
Yeah, I guess I was trying to say, it's this big, lush string sound, and we support that, and occasionally we overshadow it. If we're playing, Shostakovich or something, then we'll flex our muscles a little bit more, but it's really about the rich and blend, especially with Wolfgang Sawallisch, our music director for 10 years. Really was to keep the whole orchestra as in one sound.
Yeah.
But we are still proud of the Philadelphia sound, and the Rachmaninoff. He said that the Philadelphia Orchestra was absolutely his favorite, so we still play his music all the time. And any solo pianist, if they want to play Rachmaninoff, they always want to play it in Philly.
That's
so funny. We do a lot of Rachmaninoff piano concertos a lot.
So back to you really quick. What projects do you have on the horizon for like the summer period, getting back into the fall, for like you personally?
Personally, and right now, I'm pretty active on administration. I'm like on a faculty council for Curtis. We had a meeting this morning for 2 hours about that. So personally, right now, it's a little more administration stuff is what I'm doing, making plans for the fall and getting schools back in order. We had a faculty meeting, and this is all on Zoom, of course, faculty meeting for Juilliard, actually Monday was one, and then Temple the week before too. So there's quite a lot with that. I've enjoyed the administrative stuff that I've done over the years, and also at the orchestra, I've served on many committees,
Yeah.
Negotiated union contracts, and chaired the committee that hired Yannick Nazitsyan, our current music director. So that was fun, a 2-year search project like that. So me personally, in the immediate summer projects is more administrative stuff.
That's interesting, yeah.
There's a little bit, well, Juilliard is doing some summer courses where students can sign up and actually get school credit. It's neat that, so it's for current Juilliard students and incoming that the school will pay the faculty to teach, and then the students can sign up and get actually credit for the summer, since everybody's summer festivals are canceled.
Right, absolutely.
Getting some stuff for them to do. So I'll be doing just a little bit of teaching. So and being completely honest, teaching remotely is not my favorite thing to do.
Yeah.
It's necessary right now, and it is possible, absolutely possible, to get work done. It's personally, I just, playing my trombone at the computer is a little weird.
So you do it very well, but yeah, I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll be doing a little bit of that over the summer, and then looking forward to making live music again.
Yeah.
So Philly Orchestra, we may be doing some chamber music concerts in July. We're working on some plans now to try and do some things, and some quintets or something in socially distanced venues and things like that. So we're trying to find ways to do live music.
That's neat. That's very cool. We had just 2 last questions that kind of popped in right now, and they're both really good. So if you have a second, I know we're just about 9 o'clock, but I'd love to.
Where am I going?
Hey, perfect. The first one is kind of on a similar topic, but can you talk a little bit about choosing the right college or conservatory for a high school student who wants to go into music performance?
Music performance, say, does the student want to be an orchestral player? Does he want to be a jazz player? Does he want, what specific thing?
Probably from this, probably on the more classical side of things.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's keep it in the wheelhouse.
Yeah, okay. So I usually say, if you want to be an orchestral player, you have to go somewhere where there's a big orchestra that you can hear every week.
Cute.
Huge. So at least in some point of your career, so not to denigrate the very many fine universities that are not in a big city, but for me, it was absolutely essential. I heard the Philadelphia Orchestra every week when I was a student. We could get tickets through the school and sat up in the peanut gallery, and boy, yeah, I was there pretty much every weekend. So if you want to do it, you have to just absorb that sound and go watch these people do it if that's what you want to be doing. So say number one, go somewhere where you can hear a big orchestra every week and study with the people who are playing that orchestra. It's absolutely possible if you did, undergrad at some place where there wasn't a big orchestra, then you go to the big city for the grad degree. So that's one way to accomplish that sort of thing. And most people stress the individual teacher. I want to go to XYZ school and study with XYZ teacher, which absolutely the teacher-student relationship you have will be the fundamental one of your school. But also, I encourage you to pay attention to the general quality of your student classmates. So I know certainly at Curtis and Juilliard and Temple, our students say, I learned as much from my classmates as I did from my teacher.
Yeah.
So if you can, pick someplace where you have really good classmates to play with, what's the phrase? A rising tide lift all boats. So you will absolutely gain from having really great student colleagues to play with, in addition to your teacher. So those 2 things I encourage you to look for in a music school.
Yeah, that's a great answer, and good question too. And then the last question, and I think it's kind of neat, and you're obviously a great person to talk to about this, but can you talk a little bit about your time studying with Charlie? What were some of the things that you took away most from your time with him?
I've done this many times, so I've said this to Charlie's face. I'm going to say something bad about him, but it's with love, okay?
Of course.
So I said that Charlie's a terrible teacher, but I learned a lot. Okay? So I would play something, and Charlie would say, well, Blair, you should. You ought to. play it like this.
Perfect.
So we did a lot of monkey see, monkey do, which is a great way to learn. It can be very effective. So we played duets, some lessons, the vast majority of the lesson we'd just be playing duets, and just listening and matching and working that kind of stuff was great. And for me, it was a great compliment to, I also had lessons with Glenn Dodson at the same time. Glenn never brought a trombone to lessons.
Wow.
He'd bring a mouthpiece. If he wanted to demonstrate, he'd ask to play your instrument, demonstrate. But so he had a very, very organized, specific thing, and he had his own little lingo. We call them Dodsonisms. He'd write things down. So from him, I got a very cerebral analysis, and and a good specific language to work on. And then with Charlie, it was just a great, just do that, just absorb, listen, and do that kind of thing, and just match. So that was a really great combination for me of two very different ways of teaching, but ultimately very effective.
Wow, that's interesting. That is cool to have that like duality at the same time.
Yeah, worked for me.
Yeah, that's good. Well, Blair, thank you so much for doing this with us tonight. I mean, this is a total blast. It's nice to get to see you.
Likewise.
I'm sure we would have seen each other at some trombone festival somewhere, or but for those of you who are tuning in, I did go in the comments and linked a couple things, both Blair's book about the tuning system, which is a really interesting thing to pick up and grab if you're interested. There's also the link to go check out more about his models. I always say in these things, if you have a question, feel free to always send us an email at info@shires.com. You can go on the website and just hit the little contact form, and that pops directly to us too. But it's so much fun to be able to do this with you, Blair. This is a total blast for me, and I know that all of the people who have been watching and will continue to watch, there's a lot of great nuggets of information in here to take away. So thank you for your time, and thanks to everybody for tuning in tonight. We'll keep some more Shires TV episodes coming your way each week. We usually announce them on Mondays, so keep an eye on Facebook and Instagram and all that kind of stuff for the next one. And if there's something that you'd like to see on Shires TV, send us a message and let us know, because it's fun for us to hear from you. We've got more interviews and panel discussions. We're going to do a shop factory tour now that everything's back up and running, and all of our guys and gals are so thrilled to be back building instruments, because it's definitely what we do best. But thanks so much for everybody who always tunes in. This is just one of the highlights of my week, and getting to share with somebody like Blair, icing on the cake.
Thanks, Sam. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, bye Facebook land, and bye Blair, and we'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.